Hello, good evening, everybody. Um, Welcome to yet another session of In Dialogue Foundation's Certificate Course in Dialogue Studies 2024-25. Today, we have the pleasure of having Dr. A.K. Merchant with us. Dr. A.K. Merchant is the General Secretary, the Temple of Understanding India Foundation, National Trustee, Sarvodaya International Trust, Associate Secretary General, Global Warming Reduction Center, President, Mintra Foundation, co-convener Moksha Trust World Peace Summit, Jaffna, Sri Lanka, visiting faculty, Center for Cultural Resources and Training, Ministry of Culture, Government of India. A subject expert for research scholars enrolled for interfaith education and Indian culture of the Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Fund, a member of the Baha'i Faith since 1975, he has served on administrative institutions and agencies at international, national, regional, and local levels. Currently serves as the Secretary, Baha'i Spiritual Assembly of Delhi, NCT. Dr. Merchant will be speaking on dialogue and conflict resolution. As usual, I request all the participants to keep their cameras on during the session. And Dr. Merchant, you have up to 2 hours for the entire session, including Q&A and open discussion. So you can conduct the class as however you like to. So over to you, sir.
Yeah, once again, my respects and greetings. Adabar, Namaskar. It's evening here in India. If you are elsewhere, then good day, good morning. So, dear participants and friends, Mr. Behzad Patami, and of course, India Log Dialogue is I've been associated for many years, and it gives me great pleasure to be part of this certificate program. And what I do is I learn from each other. We learn from each other. And the subject that we have before us is a very vast and a complex subject. And it has to do with the way human civilization or the human race has evolved. Because we are a product of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution here on this planet. And of course, if you go by fossil evidences, we can say we are millions of years old. But my focus will be in the last couple of hundred years, how humanity, as it has managed to shrink the time for travel, reduce the time for travel, that means the speed of travel, as it increased, many startling changes have occurred. And likewise, the communication, the way we communicate today, even 10 years, 15 years, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So starting with, the human feet, and then some domesticated animals and the horse, and then came the machines. The travel time, as it annihilated, as newer technologies annihilated distance, many startling changes happened. So that's one important criteria we need to remember. And in the context of conflict management, in terms of the interactions between peoples, communities, societies, cultures, linguistic groups, religions, socioeconomic classes, then ideological based groupings. And today we are at a time when I can say that humanity has entered the dark heart of an age of fundamental change. There have been many fundamental changes in the evolutionary process of the human race. And today, once again, we are experiencing it. Oftentimes, when fundamental changes happen, there is a great deal of tumult, upheavals, chaos, and people seem to lose a sense of meaning and purpose of why we are here. Because unlike all living creatures, human beings are the most distinguished. They have a very special position. And they are the only creatures, according to my belief and understanding, who have a life beyond this life on earth. Every other living creature, it lives according to the laws of nature. And for them, a conflict arises among themselves with respect to finding a place that is secure and safe for them, or the search for food for their survival. So humans are not simply to be confined to those things. Of course, when we were having a tribal state, a nomadic lifestyle, sections of population, small groups of population moved from place to place, always in search of shelter and food. And you have the story of the cave people. But then as human beings evolved, they began to fashion tools. They became more skilled in finding their food. In the beginnings, when we had no tools, we were completely just dependent on gathering and collecting whatever we could from the environment, from the trees. But as we began to evolve, we discovered and we applied our intelligence and started making tools. And once we started making these tools, some of them were weapons, some of them for other purposes. So we became not only gatherers, but we also became hunters. So from that state of hunter-gatherers, we began to evolve. And then when we discovered agriculture, we started settling down, because now we no longer had to move from place to place, but we could get our source of sustenance from the ground itself. So the agrarian society was the norm for many, many thousands of years. And great and eminent historians who have documented the rise and fall of civilizations, they have today got evidence that in a span of about 10,000 years, something like 21 human civilizations got established, slowly progressed, flourished, reached their zenith, and then there was a decline. We in India are very proud that ours is one of the few living civilizations. It's a very ancient civilization, and it's gone through many stages. So conflict has happened for various reasons. Conflict for territorial purposes, conflict for having control over the sources of food for our sustenance. And then as we evolved, newer dimensions of conflict also emerged. But I believe that these are actually immature stages, immature aspects of human behavior. Because I have here with me one of the reasons why we have conflict is when people started creating identities on the basis of the color of their skin. That was one reason. So we had a lot of conflicts in the name of race. Then we found that there were conflicts for reasons of belief. So religion also became a cause of conflict. Then there was conflicts between those who had and those who did not have, the haves and have-nots, the rich and the poor. So when you look at the process of evolution from the nomadic times, where tribal chiefs were the determining factors for deciding how to resolve conflicts, to the city-states that emerged, where a group of people led by a chief would determine how conflicts are to be resolved. And then the concept of the democracy also began to evolve. So conflicts have been a part and parcel of our human existence for a long time. But much of the time, according to my own reading and research, I would say that wherever there was a conflict, sometimes, very few times, a conflict could be justified where a lot of injustices were being done, exploitation was there, and so in the name of defending their families, their communities, or their society, people had no choice but to prevent people from exploiting them, destroying their lives, or annihilating their sources of survival. So today, to me, when we look at the world of 8 billion people, there are 8 billion plus people on this planet. And they are grouped, of course, as members of the United Nations into 193 member states. There are a few countries that are not the members of the United Nations. And they are spread over the entire planet. And we have these number of continents, 6 continents. So as we have evolved, we can see that on one hand, science and technology have made it possible to see the entire diversity of the human race in one perspective. So we can call ourselves that humanity is one people. And many people who have a very large vision, they also believe that the planet is also a common homeland. But unfortunately, there are so many reasons why we aren't able to think that way. And one major reason for the conflict today is that with the collective evolution of humankind, with the dismemberment of empire states and the emergence of the nation states, we are at the threshold. We have entered the dark heart of an age of fundamental change. And what is that fundamental change that is occurring and which is integral in our understanding of conflict? Because we live in a world, a planet, where everyone is interdependent. Unlike the past, where we had no means of communication, we were quite contented because we didn't know, for instance, we didn't know that across the Atlantic Ocean, there were these 2 big continents, the North America and the South America. And we didn't even know what kind of lives the people lived or whether they were any people. So like that, when the means of communication and travel were limited, we had to be confined to whatever territory, whatever knowledge we had of our own immediate surroundings. But today, when we are seeing our globe in one perspective, and we see that even a small incident in a most remote part of the globe immediately becomes known to us, the media, the means of communication. And it is so rapid that at the speed of light, we are receiving pieces of news. And we are able to travel today faster than the speed of sound. So this is a very important dimension. And unless and until we are able to positively harness the resources of science and technology, we will not be able to also address the other dimensions of conflict. So when I went through it, I would like to list out. There are some things I have listed out here. And begin with a small 3-line from a poem of T.S. Eliot. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. So a great the large population of the world, they live in that region which we can call the shadow. Because when you are under the shadow, you don't have a kind of clarity that you are expected to have. So, but there are people who think, who are very concerned about what all is happening. And some of them, they are very important people who are decision makers for large numbers of people, millions of people. So when you analyze the startling changes that have been brought about, particularly by the developments that have happened in the previous and the 20th century, what do we see? We see that the organization and direction of human society has a trajectory. And although the advances in human knowledge suggest the possibility of a significant thrust forward in the social evolution of the planet, humanity is now confronted with a series of interrelated problems that threaten both the fabric of civilized life and the natural world itself. So anyone who is following the news, reading the newspapers, or watching the television, or getting pieces of news from the social media, or even if your profession demands that you keep tabs on an hourly basis of what's happening on this planet, you begin to see that there are so many of these problems, and a few that I can list out. So the crucial need of the present hour is to identify the conceptual and practical steps that will lay the foundation of a just and peaceful global order, effectively addressing the problems now convulsing the human affairs. So from this, what do you get? Wherever there is a conflict, one thing is clear, that there is absence of justice, there is absence of peace, and there is disorder. So, number one, the crushing poverty amidst vast sections of the world's population. The global population of 8 billion plus, vast majority of them, they have very difficult lives to live. Because the way the resources of the planet are distributed are very unjust. Some people have so much, while the vast majority have hardly anything, barely enough to maybe must survive. And if that person is living in a place or in a section, in a part of the globe where there are conflicts like wars, and you have many examples today, even if you blindfold your eyes and if you touch any part of the globe, if you look at the globe, you will see that there is some conflict or the other happening. And the conflicts have multidimensional. You might have an open war like the one you have in Europe, or you have in the Middle East, or you have the internal fratricidal war like in many countries in Africa. Particularly, I can say the example of Sudan, where they are not able to find a means of governance. Even though Sudan became separated into two countries, yet most of these countries in Africa, they have very poor systems of governance, and there is a lot of conflict. And the most vulnerable, the greatest suffering caused by these conflicts are the children and the women. So crushing poverty amidst vast sections of the world's population is a very important dimension. I will elaborate more how this is to be addressed, a plausible way. The second is the oppression and exploitation of women and minority groups. So we have seen that we may talk about equality of men and women, we may talk about gender justice, and there are umpteen number of United Nations documents and conferences that have impelled the best minds, the leadership of the world to tackle this. But still, till today, this has not been resolved. Every day we get pieces of news items about the oppression towards women and towards girl child. And it is so shameful that we human beings do not realize that men and women, masculine and the feminine, it is together that makes us a human being, like the two wings of the bird. Again, I have much document here to elaborate. Then number 3 cause for conflict is the intractable conflict among nations and peoples. As I mentioned, the United Nations has 193 member states. And every year they meet on the occasion of the International Day of Peace, and the General Assembly, which comprises all the member states, they listen to each other, heads of the state or heads of the government or whoever is being nominated to address. They listen to each other, they realize the problems, they come up with definite resolutions, and yet it cannot be implemented. So again, I have much to say about it. So nations and peoples are at loggerheads and at conflict with each other. So it makes us ask the question, what is a nation state? Hasn't the national sovereignty outlived its historical phase? If the world is one, then why should the nations be at loggerheads or be in a state of conflict in the name of their territorial boundaries, or in the name of their ideological basis, or in the name of the way they trade with each other, the economic international instruments? So these are factors that also give rise to conflicts. The fourth is the disruption of global ecosystems. The ecological crisis actually has made many of the scientists who study to state that the world, in terms of its biodiversity, in terms of its environmental well-being, is in a state of its sixth mass extinction. Many times in the long history of the planet, millions and millions of years, there have been mass extinctions of the living species. So a lot of the scientists who have been working on this in this field for many decades, they have come up with a conclusion that ecologically speaking, we are in a state of sixth mass extinction. Something like more than about 50% of the biodiversity has been impacted. We know that so many animals, birds, species, they have been declared endangered, and we have to make special arrangements to protect them. So this global disruption of the ecological ecosystems, because when a world, a certain country gets desolated, when there's no means for them to survive in terms of finding food, agriculture, like, people who were tribals, they were surviving on the basis of the environment. They were very close to nature, the forest. But when the forests were cut down and it was taken away, they were displaced. So such examples are also many, and we have a lot of documentation in terms of the United Nations conferences that have been held to address this. I have also written on this subject the last time when we have what is called the COPs, where the emissions and the pollution of the Earth's atmosphere, the pollution of the Earth's rivers and oceans, the menace of single-use post-consumer waste plastics, all of this can be added, and I can elaborate on this if we have more time. Then there is a breakdown of vital social bonds, because human beings cannot live, as a single individual. Our basic unit of civilization is actually a family. And we are what is the English term known as the gregarious species, because we have to live on the basis of social bonding. So in a family, just like you have a family, a father and mother and children, and then you have the extended family. So like that, the world, in fact, in India, we are very proud to say that use the concept of the world as one family. It was reinterpreted during the hosting of the G20 summit as one planet, one family, and one future. So social bonds. And here again, I have got documentation when you talk about conflicts. There are marital conflicts, conflicts that happen within families. Sometimes these conflicts happen because of interpersonal relationships that are not harmonious. Sometimes within families, conflicts happen because the property that is to be equitably just distributed doesn't happen. Oftentimes, as per the traditional systems, the girls were never included in the inheritance of the ancestral properties. But now changes are coming. Like in India also, about 10 years ago, a very major change was made in the personal laws of religion, which ensured that the daughters have equal right to inherit the parental property. All these centuries, they were not allowed. I mean, we know that it's just about 150 years or maybe less than 200 years that the burning of widows. In the Hindu system, you had the sati, that when the husband died, and if he was young and he had a young wife, they would push the wife also into the fire. And it was not, a voluntary thing. Most of the time, it was a forced, deliberate. The poor lady had to suffer and die. So these kinds of things were there. So many age-old practices also today have to be relooked. And if they are no longer relevant to our times, we should be prepared to abrogate and remove them. Another cause for the conflicts are the breakdown of the erosion of the standards of decency. Human beings are supposed to be essentially spiritual in nature. Individually, if we are accepting that we are spiritual beings, then obviously the society also must function on the basis of spiritual principles, ethical rules. So if these are not there, then we reduce ourselves to the animals in the jungle. We become violent. We forget the goodness which is inherently in us. So erosion of the standards of decency. And this again, I can elaborate at length. It starts with the language. It starts with the home. If a child grows up in an atmosphere of love, it understands what it means to feel secure. If a child is not loved in its infancy, and it just has to survive, like the way we see the offsprings of many animals, most of the offsprings of animals, the mother is responsible only for a few weeks, while a human child requires the tender care and affection and love for at least about 15 years. So many children today are deprived. And if a child loses parents as a result of conflict, what happens to the children in the war zone? I used to be working with an NGO, that provided a lot of relief and support to children who had lost their parents due to conflicts. And if a child is not provided a foster parent who is loving and caring, then that child grows up to be a dysfunctional human being. There is a great and profound impact on the child's psyche. There have been lots of studies carried out. If you go to a prison and you try to find out why a certain person has become such a hardcore criminal, and at the end of the day, most of the time, it has been found that the upbringing the child got did not provide it a sense of security. The child never knew what it means to be loved, to be cared. And these are some of the things these are reasons why human beings grow up to become brutes, cruel. They don't understand that the violent behavior they manifest is not an acceptable form of behavior. So I can elaborate on this, and I'd like to say that today in the world, we need new models of social transformation that recognizes the deep connection between the material, the moral, and transcendent dimensions of life on earth. Because humans are the only creatures that understand the transcendent dimension, which I mentioned in the beginning, life beyond. So in this context, we have to look at our past, we have to understand the present, and we have to craft a lifestyle that will not only help us to live in harmony with our immediate environment, the ecological balance, but also all the peoples. So a good example that can be given, if you go to a garden, in the garden you see diversity. There is diversity of colors, fragrances, shapes, size, and that diversity actually contributes to the beauty of the garden. So human race is so diverse, and this diversity was never intended to be a cause of conflict. Languages, beliefs, food habits, the way we dress, the way we interact with each other, each one is unique. But that in that uniqueness, there is the larger principle of harmony, which underlies our relationships. So once we accept that, and if in our school system, a child is born, first it clings to the mother, the maximum, and then gradually it comes also to the father, and then it begins to discover the other members of the family. And then when it grows up by about 4 or 5 years, of course, you have the preschool. So the parents now want to expose it to a larger setting. So a child is taken. And in the beginning, the child never wants to leave the mother's hand. But then it is encouraged. The teacher brings the child on his lap or her lap. Mostly it is the lady teachers for the small children. And gradually the child begins to feel that, oh, apart from my home, this also is a nice and secure place. And it sees that there are children of his or her own age also in the room. And then they learn how to become friends. They learn how to speak to each other. And they are given games. So they learn, the pedagogical principles of how children are nurtured. And they are that sense of, camaraderie. They share the food, the tiffin that the mother has given the child to be eaten. And like that, the child's horizon begins to expand. And the child discovers that, okay, I belong to this home and this child belongs to that home. The child of the other parents are different. They do different things. Sometimes they may even be speaking a different language. But in the classroom, in the school, they learn how to live together. And they have to follow, of course, certain rules. So education to me is one of the most important ways to resolve conflicts. And if that education is positively transacted, the child will also grow up mature in understanding and accepting the differences, they accepting the reality that diversity was never intended to be a cause of fighting with the other. Children, of course, fight. Supposing a child has brought a toy, the parents has given them a new toy and it takes it to the classroom. Now other children have not seen it and they want to grab it. So this child, clings to it. You have seen, these are all of us quite mature adults. And if we are parents, then you know that this is what happens. And then gradually the child is told that, no, you have brought this toy, so show it. He's not going to take it away. You'll get it back. So sometimes food, so small things. But today, unfortunately, even adults behave very immaturely. They fight over small things. I always advise, since I work in the area of education, always tell parents that never give a child any toy that is in the shape of a gun or a tank, war toys. Mothers don't realize. But then if you have given them these kinds of toys, or if you have allowed your teenager to play all those computer games and all that, where it's all shooting and killing and destroying and missiles and bombing aircrafts and all that, what are you doing? You are actually very subtly, without even realizing, injecting that violence is a way of life. You're making the child insensitive. So I always, and then nowadays I've seen mothers, if they want to do some of the work in the kitchen, they just put the child, give the smartphone, and the child is just playing something without the mother realizing whether it's harming it or it's benefiting. In fact, small children should never be given these technological pieces. Because first of all, we tell the teachers that a child is not supposed to hold a pencil till the age of 5. And you must not give them these smartphones where it has to see those small images. It's actually going to be damaging. And then I've seen also people are today so much plugged all the time. Their ears are plugged and they are listening something, whether it be music. So the kind of music, the kind of amusement, the kind of books, a parent must know. If you have a teenager or a youth in your home, do you know what kind of internet sites he or she visits? What kind of books for entertainment? Because they don't only read the school or the college or the university textbooks. And plus, sometimes, what kind of friend circle do they have? So there are 3 ways, adults relate to the children. When the children are very small, they look upon us as caregivers because we care for them, we nurture them, we ensure that they are clean, they have their food, they have time for exercise, they have time to relax. If they have some problem, if we are able to handle it, we take care of it. If not, we take the child to a doctor. So they look upon us, and this is what gives them that sense of well-being and security, that I have my mother, I have my father, to whom I can openly talk and say that something is troubling me. But if the parents don't have that relationship, where will the child go? Sometimes the teenager asks his own friend circle, youth, and he might or she might get the right advice or wrong advice. So the first thing in the beginning, we are caregivers. In the second state, as the child is becoming more and more independent, we must make sure that we are the child's closest friend. If a child is not able to talk to the teacher in the classroom for some problem, for instance, another friend of his or hers has given the child some book or taken the child to an internet site or taken the child to a movie, which confuses the child or which may be damaging to the child. And if the parents don't know about it, it will cause, if the parents don't know about it, it brings problem. A child might have got a cigarette from an adult, and then your child also is told about it. But then the moment the child is told about it and the child comes and tells you, then you are immediately able to take care of the problem. This is how, so many youth who fall prey to drugs, to alcohol. I mean, so much of conflicts are there in families because of addiction to alcohol, because of bad habits. So this is at a very small societal level, community level. So in the same way, when you have to address the larger areas of conflict, we have to be aware of what is the reality that surrounds a particular situation. So one is we need to look at the discourse on conflict resolution and conflict management in a new light. And that sense of openness is very important. Today, the kind of pieces of information and the images and the sounds that we are getting bombarded every minute of our life is very, very different from the times in the past. In the past, most of the time, when the children are at home and there was extended family, they had their grandparents. If a father and mother were busy doing something else, there was always some caring adult to ensure the child would be looked after. But today, most of the time, the children don't have quality time with their adults. And so this leads them into conflict. The next important point is, apart from the education and during the process of education, because what kind of entertainment, what kind of time you spend to amuse yourself or to get out of the usual burdensome lifestyle, the daily routine, you need to take a break. So people watch television, or people go to watch sports, or people go to some club, or people themselves engage in activities which is outside of their normal routine. So you must be aware as to how the child, how the youth is amusing itself with pieces of entertainment. A lot of time, of course, people are nowadays hooked to technical gadgets, the smartphone. Today, I have a smartphone, but I use it very consciously. I don't have time to indulge in any of those very attractive and manipulative apps. So likewise, I have made sure that my children also are careful about it. We must use technology judiciously and consciously. Otherwise, technology can be a runaway issue. It can just hook you. And this is what happens. So many young people who have got hooked to living beyond their means. So for instance, if you are a middle class family, then you have to make sure that the child understands that you have only that much amount of resources. You can't be trying to ape the Joneses and living beyond your resources. So how you manage your financial commitments, that's also important. Because in a class, sometimes people come up with new gadgets, and your phone may be an old one, and all the time you're pestering your parents that I must get the latest model, but the parents cannot. So that may also become a cause of conflict. So there are many other dimensions. Then in the universities, because to a great extent, it's very much possible for parents and adults to ensure that the children, when they are in the school system, because the school system is much better regulated. But once you have finished your high school and you come into the university or the college, there is a big change, a big shift. Because now you are no longer that child who was in a school, but now you're a grown up. And here you are meeting people who have come from even more diverse backgrounds. and with greater amount of freedom. So in order to understand how freedom can benefit you, only if there are rules to take advantage of this freedom. Like for instance, look at a city traffic. In the city, you have all kinds of vehicles and they are moving at a reasonably high speed. But if they don't follow the traffic rules, what happens? There's chaos, accident. So you are given a license to bring your vehicle on the road and drive it or ride it, knowing full well, though you have the freedom to go at a much faster speed, but then you have to be conscious that there are other people also on the road. And if you do not make a proper acceptance of the rules, if you do not live by the traffic rules, you will be charged and your license will be taken away. So this is one aspect of how we understand freedom. So like today, today a child gets exposed to many things that should come to its attention when it becomes grown up, adult. But unfortunately, the kind of social media, the access to knowledge and information is so easy that a child who is not of age for a certain subject gets exposed. The kind of, amusement and the movies that are made. That's why in the past, of course, when we were small, my parents would make sure that I never went to an adult movie till I had become 18 and above. But today a child is exposed and all kinds of nonsense. And a lot of it is violence. I mean, though there are rules for the movie makers, like for instance, in India, our, film and television, there is a regulation where you cannot show any piece of violence for more than 2.5 minutes. But have you seen who adheres to it? Movies are so full of violence, so full of obscenities. And if this is shown to the child, it causes confusion because it's not yet of age. Because as we grow up, of course, we understand life better. But today, unfortunately, and that becomes a cause of inner conflict. So many spiritual gurus, they always keep talking about that you want peace, then first there should be inner peace. But if internally you're filled with conflicts all the time, how can you manifest peace? So the same goes, so a society is composed of 3 protagonists. And if you look at the pages of civilization or the history of civilizations, you will notice that any society where the 3 protagonists, these 3 protagonists are individuals, institutions, and communities. Because now I'm talking about an evolved state of life like we have today. So in every nation state, in the society, there are these 3 protagonists. And whenever these 3 protagonists lived in harmony, like individual always demands more and more freedom. Institutions want that individuals live by the rules and the regulations that they have framed. While the community, when they see that institutions members are corrupt or the individuals are not behaving properly, they raise their voice and criticize the form of governance or the form of the discharge of responsibility by the institutions. So if you want to have a peaceful society, then you have to ensure that the 3 protagonists have a balance. So again, the example of a traffic rule is very good. Example of how when we travel by train is also very good. The example of when we want to fly, there are rules. When you buy a ticket, there's a whole full page, what you are supposed to do and not do, what you can carry and not carry. So these rules are framed to ensure the well-being. So when we expand this, we have rules that govern the nation. For instance, in India, we have a constitution. And in this constitution, there are many, of course, it's a very large document. There are many things written about how a citizen of the country is supposed to live peacefully in that country. And these constitutional provisions ensure that your rights are protected, your belief system is protected, your language is protected, your right to livelihood is protected, your right to have a family is protected. But with these rights, there are also duties. So if you want these rights, then you must also make sure that you perform your duties as a good citizen. Then there won't be a conflict. Otherwise, you come into conflict with the laws of the land. So for instance, a lot of people, they are into business. They have factories, they have industries. There are people in professions. There are people who are salaried, who work with institutions, private, public, autonomous. So they all have to have rules. If you want to run an organization, there is a frame of reference, a memorandum of understanding, or a company act that you need to adhere to. And from time to time, we see that a certain corporate house, which was functioning very well, suddenly there is a crisis because rules have been violated. The government has discovered that they have taken advantage. So this keeps happening around the world. When I mentioned about the conflicts that happen in the society among nation states and the peoples, this is also one of the reasons. So the next point I wanted to bring to your attention is that ethical and spiritual dimensions in life should be uppermost when compared to material considerations for our survival. If ethical and moral imperatives are kept in mind, then there would be a better way to remove and eradicate poverty, because we will feel for those who are deprived. We will feel for those who are disadvantaged. We will feel that they, as human beings, also have a right to some of the good things that we have in our lives. And unless that dimension is addressed in the whole gamut of the developmental ethos, nation states and individuals, both collectively as well as members of the families, will continue to be oppressed. So there has to be a shift from viewing people simply as economic or material beings to primarily as spiritual beings. For instance, we know, in the past couple of 100 years, there have been so many ideologies. For instance, a very good example is the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, which was governed by the ideology of Marxist-Leninist pattern of how society is to be organized, looked upon every person in that geographical territory as a social and material being. And they created a whole system where the vast majority, of course, they were provided food, clothing, shelter, and some job, but they had no freedom to speak. Freedom of expression was always curbed. And it's lasted for about 70 years. 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution, and 1989, it finally collapsed. Today also, when you look at the capitalist models, Adam Smith's whole theory about economic well-being for the developed states, again, that is also a model that doesn't work. Though most of the capitalist countries, they were at one time colonial powers, and the material resources which they got from huge territories in Africa and in Asia is what actually contributed to them being a developed country. Today, again, in the environmental discourse, when we are talking about the carbon emissions or the greenhouse gases, the developed countries always tell the developing countries, the global south, that you have to curb without accepting that they were responsible in the first place. So there is a huge, disconnect. So now, in order for the developing countries also to get developed, they feel that they have a right to the use of fossil fuels. Though, and if the developed countries really want to help, then why are they not willing to transfer the technology for renewables, for solar energy, for the green hydrogen, for the other wind energy, because they have developed superior and better technologies, but right now we don't have it. So if they want us to really reduce our consumption of fossil fuels for the development, then they should be willing. But again, since they are not willing to do so, what they do is they say, okay, we'll give some money. We'll give a certain amount of funds so that you don't depend on fossil fuels and you try to develop by using alternatives. But then that takes a different trajectory because it is not workable. So this is again one of the reasons why there is conflict. So the true prosperity of humankind, a well-being founded on peace, cooperation, altruism, dignity, rectitude of conduct, and justice, flows from the light of spiritual awareness and virtue, as well as from material discovery and progress. Just imagine if people had really looked at the developmental agenda on the basis of spiritual awareness, on the basis of moral imperatives, then we would not have so many challenges and problems as we are facing today. For instance, in India, like about 800 million people have to be provided free rations so that they will have enough food to survive. So it's a huge disparity in this country. But they are trying the best to empower the less fortunate and the disadvantaged to also come up. But it's a very complicated and a very, I would say, conflict-ridden process, because they have created provisions like the caste system, religious minorities, the class system, the tribals. And since every country has limited resources, they aren't able to do justice. So some people get, some people don't get. And there is always a state of conflict in the society about what do we mean by economic well-being? Whose? Then again, women often get shortchanged. So you have a great challenge that people where family members have got resources, they like to send their young people to a better place. So it's quite a challenge and it's quite a complex topic. I will like to hear from you all also. So I would like to also address the issue of religious conflict. I have attended many of the parliaments of the world's religions. Some of you might be aware that 1893 there was the first parliament in Chicago, and it was in the context of the 400 years of the discovery of North America. I mean, according to the accepted written history, they said Christopher Columbus, who wanted to actually discover India, landed in North America. And so in 1893, they wanted to celebrate the 400 years of the discovery. And then there were some people who belonged to various churches. They said, why not also invite people from different religious backgrounds to also come and dialogue, sit together and get to know each other better. And for the first time, it was decided that we should not only invite various church leaders, but let us invite people from other religions. So there were people from Europe, from people from India, and all the religions were represented. People got to know better what was Hinduism. People got to know what Jains believe. People got to know about Buddhism, because these religions were quite far away from the Western church-based religious organizations. And as they did dialogue, it was a week long, so they got a better understanding. And they found that this was a very wonderful and useful exercise, that in this world, there are belief systems other than those which are telling us that Jesus Christ is the only path to our salvation. They got Muslim leaders, and they decided that this kind of a parliament of religions should be held uh, whenever possible. And in that parliament, of course, they decided the next parliament should be held about 50 years later. But unfortunately, when the 50th anniversary of the parliament came, nobody could do anything and it passed. So about 10 years before, or about 7, 8 years before the centenary of the Parliament of World's Religions, again, religious leaders from all over got together. They said that it was a very important landmark historical event. So why not plan for a centenary of the Parliament of World's Religions? So in 1993, they had the centenary. And here again, about more than 6,500 people were there. They got together, they discussed. And in the beginning, most of the parliaments were discussing only about the religions, what each belief system constituted, and the denominations within each system. But as the parliaments advanced from 1993 to 1999 and 2004 and 2009, 2014, 2000, we had in, sorry, it was in 2015. After the 2004, the next parliament they had was 2009, and after that was 2015. Then in these parliaments, because in 1993 they decided that we should hold a parliament of religions once every 5 or 6 years. And that's how, and different parts of the globe were identified, because it requires a lot of effort to bring thousands of people together and to structure the programs and all that. I have had a good fortune of participating in most of these. The last one they had, and then as the parliament progressed, their agenda also expanded. They brought in the gender dimension, gender equality. They brought in the dimension of why there should be violence in the name of religion. Why some people are religiously motivated to enter into conflict and violence. Then they brought in also the ecological dimension, and they linked it up with the United Nations Millennium Development Goals, the shortage of water, the shortage of food, the exploitation of people who are minority religions. So as the agenda expanded, so today, when you go to a parliament of world religions, it is not simply the discussion about religion. It discusses all of these issues which I have brought before you, from the developmental agenda of the United Nations to the systems of governance, to environment, ecology, to even aspects of pollution, to the crisis of water, even agriculture. So religious, and they in that 1993, one of the documents that emerged was called the Golden Rule. And they say, unless and until there is peace among religions, there can be no peace on earth. It's a very tall order, because sometimes within religions also, the different denominations are also at conflict with each other. Now, today in India, we are having this great, you must have seen on the television or seen the newspaper, image after image about this great Mahakumbh, where there are that a place called Prayagraj. They have made huge arrangements, because so many millions of people believe that once every 12 years we have to hold this great event, and it is always on the banks of the river. And when you go there and you take a dip in the river, you become purified. That's the belief. There is also the 6-year period, but this one is the largest. And just imagine, over a period of 40 days, they are expecting something like 400 million people to come. And every day now, which started yesterday, it will go on up to 26th of February. But is this the showcasing of a religious system going to bring peace? Will it eradicate conflict? Or will it just remain a 40-day circus? That's the question. Though many people, of course, we have to take a positive view that, okay, all these people are coming with great sense of devotion, even people from other countries who may not be Hindus, they are coming. And they say that all the arrangements are very good, we are enjoying. But on the other hand, you also see demonstrations and patterns of behavior which make you feel, oh, it's a lot of entertainment. So is it going to enkindle that spiritual energy within you? Or will you just enjoy yourself for a few hours or a few days and then be back to business as usual? A Christian goes to the church every Sunday. You're supposed to attend the Mass and you listen to the Word of God. You listen to the sermon of the priest and you tell yourself, oh, I'm going to make myself a better human being. I committed some sin. Or a Muslim goes to prayer every Friday. That's a very mandatory communal community activity. And then when you pray, but if you have just done it mechanically and not pondered over what your prayer has been to God, and if you don't become a better person after having made that prayer, then it is simply a waste of time. So I feel that a lot of the time today, the traditional religious systems, many of the practices, they are not helping us to overcome conflict or become a better human being. So we have to ask ourselves. It requires a lot of introspection. So when we talk about education, then the spiritual education is also important. As we build our capacities to become a professional or to become a management person or to become a teacher, a doctor, to run a business properly, we have to also build our capacity for that spiritual understanding. So I've seen in many families, parents, they teach their children prayers, and before the child goes to bed, they turn in silence to whatever direction they feel is their creator or God, and then the child is put to sleep. So the child does not understand that actually the parents are building a relationship with something intangible. So when we talk about God, about creator, at the end of the day, it's a big mystery. But since human beings have that transcendental dimension, something that goes beyond our physical being, beyond our material existence, so as we grow, we are able to create a bond, create a relationship with that intangible reality, the ultimate truth. And we give different names. As a Muslim, you may say it's Allah. As a Christian, I may say it's God. As a Hindu, I may say it's Bhagwan, Ishwar. Or if I'm a Zoroastrian, I say it's Ahura Mazda. If I'm a Jain, I'll say that no, there is only nature. I don't have any that concept. And so some religions, you even have a form. You have a lot of, statues, pictures, shapes, sizes to make you understand that intangible reality. But at the end of the day, so long as a mature human being, you realize that there is something intangible, transcendental, holy, sanctified, which also can come to your aid when you are in trouble. And those who are believers will vouch for it, that prayer has always helped. Prayer, meditation, sitting in silence and doing an introspection over what is happening to our life can help us to overcome certain conflicts. It makes you peaceful. That's why every religious system tells you that you must take out some time from your busy schedule and spend in silence or go to a place of worship which gives you a feeling of spirituality. So every religion talks about. And I, as a member of the Baha'i community, have strong belief in the power of prayer. And also, I'm taught that every human being is born noble and good. No human being is born with any tendency for conflict or evil. It is the kind of environment, the surrounding, the upbringing. So even the worst of criminal, there is some goodness hidden deep. And once you are able to converse and lift the layer after layer, you realize that yes, the poor guy never was given a chance to understand that deep within him or her, there are those human values, those God-given, attributes, which make us believe in truth, which make us crave to be an honest person, which make us crave to be kind and loving and compassionate, to be helping. All of these are, the attributes. And if you don't have them, you become a human being full of conflicts. It also tells us that the kind of language we use. Sometimes, I see that the moment a person has woken up, he can't speak a sentence without some abusive word. And they believe that this is the normal language. And the child is picking it up. And the child doesn't even know the meaning. He heard it from the adult in the home. So we have to be so careful if you really want to address all of the different dimensions of how conflicts are to be resolved. So at the same time, it must be recognized that much darkness and confusion can be attributed to those who have appropriated the symbols and instruments of religion for their own selfish purposes. Whenever there is a conflict in the name of religion, there is somebody who might have instigated the situation. And if it has been done with some ulterior motive or some personal benefit, then of course, a way has to be found. So the same case, for instance, if a person is a scientist, and if a company has given a research project to that scientist, the scientist has a right to know that what is the outcome of my research? Is the outcome of my research going into making a better medicine? Or is it going for the making of a more lethal weapon? Very often, a government will never tell the scientists. Every government allots huge amount of budget for new research, new knowledge, new instruments, new technologies to emerge. And you don't know what is the end use of that. So as a human being, actually, I should question that, okay, I'm doing a research. I hope that this research will be of benefit to humankind. But if it's not going to be of benefit, it's going to actually harm the society, then I should not be part of that research. So many times, I've seen pharmaceutical companies, and sometimes you read an advertisement, oh, drinking coffee, 3 cups of coffee is very good for your heart. Or they'll say drinking a glass of red wine is actually helpful. But at the end of the day, no. Anything that is beyond moderation. And alcohol, it has been definitely proved, is harmful. Cigarette is harmful. Any drugs you take without a doctor's prescription can be harmful. So here, in the world that we live today, most people, they have no freedom to question. So in religion also, there are some religious leaders who don't like their followers to ask them any questions. If you ask them questions, they'll say, this is a bad guy, don't bring him here. So I feel that whatever path, spiritual path that we follow, it should be done with understanding. We can't be blind to our beliefs. Because if you are blind to your beliefs, then you can also easily fall prey to prejudices. One of the reasons why there are conflicts in the name of religion is because of prejudices. You have been given a certain piece of knowledge about certain peoples or situations which are not correct. Ignorance is again one reason. So most people, if they know a little bit about their own religion, they hardly know about the others. But so if you want the world to be at peace, then you have to know about other belief systems. And you should be willing to accept and value and respect. Okay, this is your belief system. Like you have conflicts between a vegetarian and a non-vegetarian. You know, in the food, you have conflict in the name of languages. For a long time in South India, people were very unhappy. They would never accept Hindi, which is spoken in northern India, to be the national language. So if you layer after layer, conflicts are there, but they can be resolved. So I have addressed the aspect of religion, and I would humbly appeal that all of us who are part of this study should know at least the basics about every religion. Who was the founder? What are the teachings? Where was it started? Because every religion has also a historical background. And some of the teachings of a particular religion were also in the context of that historical background. So today they may say that, well, in the past it was relevant, but today it is not. So we have to be willing to change and upgrade ourselves. I also have read, of course, in the writings of our Fatullah Gulen, he was a very broad-minded person who taught the harmony of religions. Of course, he passed away recently. So friends, religion again is something, because religion is actually the faculty of human nature. A great historian, yes, Arnold Toynbee, he described religion as a faculty of human nature. So religion, apart from helping us as individuals, also has a social dimension. Because it is religious teachings that have provided the concept of how societies can live in peace and harmony. It is religious teachings that have mandated that we should be honest, we should be truthful, whatever is required to manage our lives, the earnings is done through our own honest means. It is religion that tells us about what is compassion, what it means to be kind, because ethics, the source, the foundation of ethics actually has come from the religious books. For instance, I mentioned the Golden Rule. And now, you know, the United Nations itself has adopted it, that the 5th of April is the Golden Rule Day. The first week of February is the Interfaith Harmony Week. 16th of November is the United Nations International Day of Tolerance. So they are, even the United Nations has realized that secular or pragmatic approaches to solving conflicts are inadequate. You have to bring in the spiritual dimension. And that would reinforce your... So in conflict resolution, for instance, one of the important criteria for that is how to dialogue. There are rules. When you meet, for instance, in the legal parlance, you have got something called arbitration. For instance, two parties, they have a certain conflict, whether it may be a conflict over certain transfer of goods or transfer of services. And then it's seen that somebody has taken advantage. So they went to the court of law. The court of law, of course, will take a long time to resolve that conflict. So sometimes the two parties agree that let us go for arbitration. And so they decide on who are the people who will be the jury responsible for the arbitration. There's always some retired judge and some lawyers, and they set out the rules. And both the parties agree that whatever that arbitration council or committee will decide would be acceptable to both the parties. And then the conflict is solved. So they have this third party mediation. So likewise, in marital conflicts, people are married. They have, at one time, they were so close to each other, loved each other. They could not live without each other. And suddenly something happens and some conflict arises. So in most cases, marital conflicts begin, by the use of language. if either spouse, if you use any derogatory words, it really hurts. And then if it gets expanded, then it becomes mudslinging, abusive, and it becomes so painful that now you can't even see each other. So finally, you have to separate. So in marital conflicts also, most of the time, those people who are there, they patiently listen to both the parties and they find out that sometimes it is very trivial, small things. At one time, they were so loving to each other. And then when they do the mediation, we also bring in the family. They say that, look, if you have children in the homes, what will happen to them? So there have been many cases where these marital conflicts have been smoothly resolved. But some cases, the antipathy becomes so deep that there is no other alternative. And then they go through a lot of process. You have the first is, of course, the relationship is no more. The second is, what about the child's custody? If the child is a minor, small, then obviously the mother would be the one who would have to take charge. But if there are grown-up children, then they have to find ways how both the parents will ensure that children are still stay connected to them. Then if there is the material dimension, property, if the woman has been always a homemaker, then what happens when the person who was a breadwinner in the house is not there? So all these issues are taken up. So I'm talking about conflicts in so many ways. Third is there are many things that we can do in conflict resolution. The societal dimensions are building partnerships, moral education, harmony of science and religion, significance of the equality of women and men, the need for good governance, acceptance of religious diversity, creating value-based economics, and the role of technology, which is modulated with spiritual principles. I've attended so many talks and seminars about artificial intelligence, the use of ChatGPT. I've not even addressed it. Now, if I have a conflict, I'll go to ChatGPT. I'll tell ChatGPT, please, I have this conflict. Now tell me how's the solution. I'll go to a robot. If there is a marital conflict and you ask a robot that the two of us are not able to live together as husband and wife, so solve it. And it'll happen. So you can see how with the changing of society and the times, new issues are arising. But at the end of the day, as human beings, we have to find ways to live with each other in harmony, live with each other in a peaceful atmosphere, live with each other with a sense of justice. That just as you don't, if I, like in the golden rule, do unto others as you would be done by. If something you don't like, then you know that other person will also not. So these are very profound, deep-seated principles. If they are kept in mind, can help us to resolve most of the conflicts. Because at the end of the day, my own study and research tells me that most of the conflicts have always arisen on petty issues, which could have been resolved very easily in the beginning stage itself. The language, the mindset, the behavior, the respect, and the sense of dignity. Because as human beings, we have been created to live with harmony, in harmony and peace. Otherwise, religion is supposed to be for love and peace. Science is supposed to have made our lives better, easier. So we have used science to create such lethal weapons that within 30 minutes, the entire globe can be wiped out. One other dimension of my life study is thermonuclear warfare. I can lecture to you about the kind of weapon systems they have. So, friends, I'm sorry that I may have taken more time than allotted to me, but please, I would love to listen to you, and you may have a much better understanding of the subject, and I will benefit because at the end of the day, I'm always in a learning mode. Life is a journey, and there's no end to new things that you can learn, and you can benefit from your exchange of ideas and thoughts and views and working with each other. So, Mr. Behzad Fatemi, I'm extremely grateful that you have given me
Yes.
this opportunity to share a few thoughts. I don't know how coherent or how logical and beneficial,
No, Dr.
but
Merchant.
I've tried to do my best.
Yes, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I found it very profound presentation actually, and very beneficial. I mean, this approach to conflict resolution, where we focus more on individuals and how we raise children, is an important aspect. A lot of times we tend to discuss macro level problems, conflict between nation states and ethnicities and all of that. And we try to find political solutions to those problems. That is important, but at the same time, what is at the core of it is what kind of individuals we are and what kind of individuals are we raising as a society. So that's very, very important. And second point that I really found interesting and beneficial, noteworthy, is accepting diversity as a reality of this world. That is something that we must understand, that this is something that exists in this world, and we need to not just accept it, but also celebrate it. And as believers of certain faiths, so as Creator is almighty, is able to do anything that it wants. It has the power to, kun fayakun, as is the expression in Arabic, right? So if it wanted, we all would have been created as mirror image of each other, but we're different. No two individuals are alike, not even siblings. So we need to accept it, and then we also need to learn to celebrate it. So thank you so much for these very important points. Now we open the floor for discussion and questions, comments. All the participants, you can go one by one. Please click on the raise of hand, or right now we do not have anybody, so anybody can go first. Jay has clicked on raise hand. Jay, you can go.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Am I audible properly?
Yes, yeah, you are very much. Sorry.
Okay. So, sir, when I reflect on your talk, and when you started with basically, how I think the first thing that, when you started with a very powerful thought that modernity has brought together, has brought the world closer, right? And so, with I think, and towards the end, when you talk about technology and how we are dependent on technology, so in between, I wanted to ask uh, do you feel that humanity as a whole has grown more apathetic because of this technology and because of this closeness, or is that something that sort of exists in a bubble where where we see all these atrocities in the world happening right now, and we are so desensitized to it? I think you talked about it in how we are so desensitized to violence through the media we consume. So do they so is there like a active role in the apathy that humans have? Is it a new thing, or has it always existed, that apathy for the other, this us versus them mentality that exists? Is it being exacerbated, or is it being reduced?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jay.
At,
Can we take
okay,
one
I take a few
question?
questions. I
Yes.
made a note.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Anybody else who with a comment or question, please go next, and then Dr. Merchant can address them both together. Purvi, I'm sure you have some comment, if not a question.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, sir, for an amazing presentation. I think it's very rare that I don't have a comment or a question. But it is very interesting to hear. So I relate with the political part because I belong to that section. Yes, amazing to hear from you. I actually do not have any comments. So I'd just say that, yes, I actually found this part really interesting when you said that there are three protagonists of society: the individual, institutions, and communities, and how they're all after each other. So that was a good takeaway. So I'm actually glad and grateful to have attended. Sorry, I don't have any comment or question. I'm just
very interesting. I think I'll comment on that. Supposing you're living in a society or a place, a housing complex, if you're in a gated colony and there is a resident welfare association, you see all three institutions there. If there is harmony among all the residents in that particular area, then if there are problems of security or uncleanliness or dog menace, like in a place where I live, this dog menace is very become a big issue. Many children have been bitten. So they are trying to find a way. Then sometimes you have to make sure that the water comes only a certain number of hours in a day. So if all the residents form a nice resident welfare association and take responsibility, then you will see that the institution called the Resident Welfare Association, the individuals who live in different houses, and the entire collective community in that gated colony, they can have a wonderful life together. The children will be safe and happy. They'll make sure that all the government resolutions are complied with. If there is any problem from the part of the government not fulfilling their responsibility, then you can collectively leverage instead of individual homes going to lodge complaints. So there are many ways. Conflicts happen, every day. You're traveling in a metro or traveling in a bus. I mean, sometimes the buses get crowded, or some hours you have relatively sufficient space. But if people don't, for that small period of 15, 20 minutes or half an hour, remain at peace with each other, you can't travel in that bus or in that metro coach or in the train compartment.
So I'd like to also take another example. So I might differ from what you said. So you talk about harmony and, harmonizing these three compartments, these three protagonists.
Yeah, there has to be a balanced relationship.
So I'd like to put gender here. So as an individual, we as women, we want our freedom, right? We want to exert our freedom. Yeah. And then there are certain policies made, or the political sort of environment which tries to take control of women's bodies. And then, as institutions, we have policies of family planning or whatsoever, like, certain policies which try to control women's bodies. And then obviously there are communities such as NGOs or certain gender communities, which are actually exerting want liabilities from these institutions. So I'd like to look into these from that lens. So yeah, it was very interesting for me. Thank you.
Yeah. The role of the civil society to ensure that there is justice, there is fairness, and
yes, and there's liability for
there is a whole human rights. I mean, I could not, because time constraint, if I take up the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the two other covenants, again. So in terms of understanding legislation, laws, we have human beings have progressed a lot. We are no longer living in a barbaric age, but then there is still barbarism quite evident. So that actually brings me to the first question, that collectively as a human species, we have evolved. When all this advancement that has happened, like in India, for instance, before the independence of India, we used to have regular famines and food shortages. But then with the help of technology and making proper use of the agricultural land available, we are today able to feed a population that is 4 times. So the progress is there, but the conflict is there because it is not equitably distributed. There has to be equity and justice. So if you have a global GDP of $105 trillion, just imagine, 1 trillion has 12 zeros. The poverty can be removed. But then some people have it so much and some people are deprived. So it reminds me of what Mahatma Gandhi said. The earth has enough for every human being's needs, but not for anyone's greed. And during his own time, he told all the Indians, he said that never imagine that you can have a living standard comparable to the British in the United Kingdom. That small island country at that time had only 15, 20 million people. while here in India we were 300 million. And he said that you don't have enough planets, the kind of resources you require. So we need to live a life that is not also frugal, but at the same time that is not also extreme. So today, one of the big causes of conflicts is the world is living in extremes. Extremes of wealth, extremes of poverty, extremes of violence, extremes of even when they want to be happy, they try to go to an extreme. And that kind of happiness is described as cheap thrills. For those 10, 15 minutes of cheap thrills. But that's not true happiness. So we live in a very strangely disordered world. But if we pause and reflect, we can work towards a conflict-free world. There will always be challenges, but you need not have serious conflicts.
Thank you. Randall? Randall, do you want to speak? Yes.
Yes. Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Mm-hmm.
Right. Dr. Merchant, thank you for the talk. It was quite interesting. I was wondering if you could spend maybe a minute or two explaining about this transcendence of the human. I'm imagining that it is linked to the aspect of ethical and spiritual, the importance that you gave to those aspects which you're saying are given less importance compared to the material, and also if it is linked in some way to your faith, if you could make a connection, if there is a connection over there, or it's just a life philosophy.
It's quite a profound topic. It's interesting, and that every human being, if were to understand that dimension, I'm sure that their perspective would change. Their behavior with their fellow human beings also would improve. So if you want me to explain that, I meant the transcendental dimension, simply put, is that we human beings, unlike the animals and birds and other living creatures, first of all, we transcend the laws of nature. We humans don't have any wings, but we can fly higher than any other. And of course, this reality about being superior to birds came only when about maybe 500, 700 years ago, when at one time humans, they looked at the sky and the birds and they just wondered, what freedom, what wonderful life they are living. Or when they looked at the way some of the animals, the speed at which they moved, because up to 1839, the horse was the fastest means of travel. It's only in 1839 that there was a race between the horse and the steam engine. And though the jury saw that the steam engine lost the race, but they declared the days of the horse are gone. The machines will take over. So once we realize that transcendental dimension means that beyond my body, I have what is called the soul, the rational soul, the Ruh, the Atma. That's why I have an afterlife. Unlike the other creatures, because my belief as a Baha'i is that an animal does not have an afterlife. A bird does not have an afterlife because they fulfill the function, their life on this earth itself. They have a spirit which is giving them life, but they don't have a rational soul. All creatures have been given a voice, but humans have a language. We, because of our intellect, we have the power of reasoning. We, in fact, have the power of double discrimination, thought and action. Whatever you want to act upon, first it is in the form of a thought. Of course, most of our actions are all premeditated. You think and then you act. Certain functions of the body, of course, are involuntary. You're batting of your eyelids, you don't have to think about it because it happens. So friends, this transcendental dimension is very important because this is what gives us the capacity to praise our Creator. What we do in prayer. We express gratitude. We praise the glory and the majesty of the power that brought creation into being. No animal, no monkey. Have you seen any monkey say a prayer or a dog say a prayer? No, they don't, because those faculties are not given to them. Those attributes are not given. And that's the reason why in the Holy Scriptures, it is said that human beings have been created in the image and likeness of God. In the Holy Quran, God says, I made you the Khalifa, the Ashraful Makhlukat, the best of creation. In the Hindu scriptures, likewise, the Sarvashresh Prani. But unfortunately, when we forget our transcendental dimension, then we begin to behave like animals. We fight, we abuse, we don't use a language. And today, unfortunately, technology has taken away that richness, texture of the language. I'm a student of English literature. When I read Shakespeare, it's not easy to understand, but I appreciate when I read the classics. Oh, what language! And every language has got its very rich literature. All the Indian languages, classical languages, if you go to those literature, because literature reveals humanity like no other subject. It tells you how human beings lived at different times of in the evolution of history. And it also makes you wonder that how wonderful human beings have been in being able to compose. Like when you listen to good music, unfortunately today, I don't listen to this music of metal and chains. I prefer my old evergreen numbers or classical music. I love that because that kind of music gives wings to my soul. I don't want a music that is just hip and hop and shake. When maybe on an occasion when you're in a marriage party, you just join, but that's not the music I would love. So if we get our children to appreciate the classics, the richness of literature, of classical music, of the dance forms. India has the dance forms that no other country has. The Bharatnatyam of Tamil Nadu or the Kuchipudi or the Kathak or the Bihu, every state has got its own unique. And all these dance forms actually are linked to spirituality because it was an offering to the divine. So, these are some things that make us a better human being. And then you realize that there's no reason for any conflict. If somebody, is not giving you space or wants to take away something, these trivial things, why should you bother much? So otherwise, if we don't become a grown-up and if we behave continually like a child who is always attached to the toys and material things and always self-centered. Today, unfortunately, materialism has made us also quite self-centered. People are only concerned about themselves. But unless and until we have a wider horizon, we are able to look beyond our own immediate lives and think about others, society will not change. So you have to have a very broad vision. Actually, I have to also leave by 9 because
yes. So we can just have the final question from Yasin and finish up.
Sorry, I have taken more time than you.
Yeah, no problem. Yasin, go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Merchant, thank you for today's session. It was very interesting.
Most welcome.
You talked about 1993 session of Parliament of World
The
Religion.
centenary of the Parliament of World Religion.
Yeah. In that, one resolution was taken that until there is peace among religions, there cannot be peace on earth. Do you think this is achievable in this time of social media when there is a lot of rumors on social media? And this, do you think it is possible now?
If you link it to your education system, it is possible. Like whatever belief system you have, you must believe in whatever you are believing consciously, rather than that somebody has told you that you do this. This is the truth. Because every human being has been given the gift of understanding to search after truth and accept it. There should be no blind faith. There should be no simply following certain rituals. So it is possible, and it has to be linked to our education system. In fact, the UNESCO's education framework for the 21st century actually encourages us to do that. Have you heard of the UNESCO's education framework? It is titled Learning, the Treasure Within. And it has got 4 pillars. The first pillar is learning to know, learning to acquire knowledge, learning to do, you acquire skills, learning to live together. You understand that in the midst of all this diversity, we still can find ways to live together, appreciate each other. And the final is learning to be. This is highly philosophical. What makes you a human being? Have you asked? Does fighting with other human beings make you a human being? Does abusing another human being make you a human being? Or does being compassionate, kind, and loving to another human being make you a human being? Does turning to your transcendental dimension and invoking the forces of the divine make you a human being? Or does harming another human being or killing make you a human being? So learning to be. And I have got a full, I actually teach these subjects at the Center for Cultural Resources and Training. And it's some part of it is also there in the National Education Curriculum Framework 2020. So every night I pray before I go to sleep that how was the day? Did I use a wrong word? Did I think something negative? Did I harm anybody by my statements? Can I be a better human being tomorrow? Otherwise, there are so many creatures all over the world. If you just have to subsist like an animal who looks for the food and looks for a secure place to rest, but that's not the purpose why we are here. As Mr. Behzad pointed out, God wanted to make all human beings united. Why would he have created diversity? So to an extent, life is a paradox. Many things appear to be true, but not the complete truth. In some scriptures, it is said that some of the truth, complete truth, you will realize only after you have left this world. Because in this world, there are limitations. But you accept the limitations and still live as good as possible. So God gives us laws and ordinances. You know how the Prophet Muhammad taught the Arabs not to drink? Because drink alcohol is prohibited. So it was a tough time for him. So what he told them, that at least when you come for prayers, don't come drunk. Otherwise they would come drunk. And then after a few years, he said, it is prohibited. Alcohol is not permissible. You just imagine these Arabs, how he united these 800 tribes, warring tribes in the Arabian region. I mean, I've studied the history of all the religions. Today, you are having the Mahakumbh, and there are 350 sampradayas within the Sanatan Dharma. And this is not me telling it. It is the Sant himself is telling. There are 13 akhadas. So diversity is so overwhelming, but you can see how they have managed to showcase a unified, peaceful, joyful, happy. So friends, I must thank you all and look forward to meeting you again sometime. And my gratitude to Mr. Behzad for giving me the opportunity. I'll be at your service whenever he asks me. So it'll be my pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Merchant, for your time and for your words of wisdom. I absolutely enjoyed the session, and I'm sure that's what everybody else feels in the group. So thank you so much again. We'll see you next time.
Yeah. All the very best of times to all of you.